Hello, this is Augie Macro with Cryptid Creatures. Today we are going to talk about one of the most infamous mythical creatures of them all, the dragon. Dragon is a term given to generally reptilian creatures sighted in all cultures throughout history. Many of these dragons include the Naga of Indian and Southeast Asian folklore, the Orochi of Japanese mythology. Ancient Greek mythology is littered with tales of dragons, such as the Chimera, the Colchis dragon, and the Lernaean Hydra of the story of Heracles. This nine-headed beast is known for living in the swamps of Greece, and when its head is cut off, a new one grows back. The legend of Heracles tells that he killed the creature by cutting off all 9 of its heads and burning the necks so then no heads could grow back. In ancient Egyptian mythology, it tells of Apep or Apophis, the ancient serpent god of chaos. It was said that Apep and Ra, god of the sun, would battle for supremacy every night over the earth. Ra won every time, banishing Apep to the void of space. Though dragons are often thought of as being strictly European or Asian in origin, there are even dragon stories in the New World, such as the Quetzalcoatl of Aztec mythology. It was said to be the god of the heavens and the sky, and it was able to travel between heaven, earth, and the underworld. The Zealand of Russian mythology, the cockatrice of European folklore, the Zmej Gorynych of Slavic folklore, the wyvern of English mythology, the knucker of English mythology, and the tatzelworm of Germanic folklore. Eastern dragons, such as the Chinese lung, are often seen as benevolent creatures, giving people who see them good luck and fortune. Here we are at the Pittsburgh Zoo and PVG Aquarium, where they are celebrating the Asian Lantern Festival. One of the models they have is the Chinese dragon, which in Chinese mythology is renowned for being an elemental being. The European dragon is often seen as a malevolent or even demonic creature due to their fire-breathing habits and their shared appearance with the biblical devil. This particular type of dragon is well known for its armor, fireproof scales, its large horns, its carnivorous teeth, its huge bat-like wings, and its ability to breathe fire. Though many of the legends may seem outlandish, there are in fact some real-life examples of explanations for them. Things like fossilized dinosaur skeletons, snakes, lizards, and other reptiles living today, and even some birds. Many modern-day reptiles have been named after these creatures, such as the bearded dragon and the Komodo dragon. One such dragon legend is that of the Snallygaster. Earlier this year, we got to sit down and talk with Sarah Cooper, curator of the American Snallygaster Museum in Libertytown, Maryland.
My name is Sarah Cooper. I'm the founder and curator of the American Snallygaster Museum.
What first got you interested in cryptids?
When I was about 9 or 10, there was a publication called Weekly World News, and they would put out these really absurd stories about citing Elvis and all these, really silly things, all kinds of paranormal stuff. And they had this character called Bat Boy, who was like a half bat, half human cryptid. And he was a kid about the same age as me in this little, in their story. And I was just so intrigued by it, and that's what got me super hooked on all paranormal cryptozoology stuff. And I'm sad they don't publish anymore because it was really, really silly. I would just stare at that at the grocery store like, wow, what is it? It was like so cool.
What inspired you to begin a museum dedicated to the Snallygaster?
I've been collecting cryptid art for a little while, And then in 2020, when COVID started, I had to come up with some kind of hobby to distract myself. And this was so far removed from all the bad things going on in the world and all the stress and everything. And it was like this whole other thing I could have where none of that stuff could touch it, because it's like this fantasy and it's folklore, and it just became this kind of larger than life thing. And it started as just collecting, and then I was like, no, because I visited a lot of the museums we talked about. I really loved Mothman Museum, Flatwoods Monster Museum. I was like, I can do that. And so I decided that's what I was going to do with my nervous energy back in 2020.
Could you give us a history of the Snallygaster?
Absolutely. Okay, so we have Maryland in the 1700s. It's starting to be settled by a lot of different cultures. We have English, Irish, German people, and a lot of people are settling up in Western Maryland toward the Pennsylvania border, up in Cumberland and that kind of area. And the Germans brought over this concept called Schnellgeist or Schnellergeist, which means quick spirit. And it was basically the idea of just something that caused mischief in your house. And then as they acclimated to culture here, American culture, and everything that was going on with that big melting pot, Schnellergeist became Snallygaster. And unfortunately, a lot of what happened between the 1700s and the early 1900s wasn't written down. So I don't know exactly how the word transformed or how it became this dragon creature. But I know that toward the 1800s, mid-1800s, it started to become this kind of fearsome critter, almost like a lumberjack cryptid. It's this creature that swoops down and gets your livestock and carries away unruly children and things like that. And that was kind of how it became a physical form. And then in 1909, around the same time as the Jersey Devil, there was like that big newspaper headline stuff that was going on. Maryland had sightings of the Snallygaster. There's a lot of theory that some people think they could be related or the same monster, but that's when it really took off running in the newspaper. And 1909 is about the same time that tale about Teddy Roosevelt coming up here to hunt it, or canceling a trip to come up here to hunt it. That became a big thing. That's when the Smithsonian offered a reward for its capture. So it became a really big part of Maryland culture at the time, because in 1909, I don't think there was a whole lot to do sometimes, so it was kind of fun to make up these stories, or maybe they were really seeing it, who knows. And then after Teddy supposedly came up to hunt the Snallygaster, it went missing for 23 years. 1932, we have Prohibition going on, so the Snallygaster became something that moonshiners used to explain the sounds that were happening up in the mountain when they were making moonshine, and to keep people away from their operations. They would say there was this big dragon up there. And that's when it became another big thing in the newspapers, and that's kind of when it took on a sillier tone, where people started to kind of mock the idea. And that's also the same time period where it supposedly died, because it was circling around this big vat of moonshine. It really liked the smell, and the fumes of the alcohol overwhelmed it, and it went crashing in and drowned in it. So that's kind of the basic chunk of Snallygaster lore.
In your opinion, what do you think the Snallygaster is?
Oh man, so I like to think that, so South Mountain, where it's been spotted a lot, is actually the second oldest mountain range in the world, only to one in Africa, so it's part of Appalachian Mountains. So I like to think there's some kind of maybe dimensional portal or something there, or a time slip, and maybe it's either an ultra-terrestrial, like John Keel's theory, these creatures that slip through these little cracks in our reality that kind of swoops in and out, or I also like to think that it could be a pterodactyl kind of creature, similar to the Van Meter visitor, and people are just confused about what they're seeing.
How would people be able to learn more about the museum?
So we have a website, snallygastermuseum.com. I'm mostly active on Instagram, and that's at American Snallygaster Museum. So we also have a Facebook page, but I'm horrible about going on there and answering messages. So I think email and Instagram are like the best options. And email is snallygastermuseum@gmail.com. So it's easy peasy, if you can spell Snallygaster, I guess. My friend Risa made this. It actually won a taxidermy competition a few years ago. It was like a folklore-inspired piece. So she did this vulture to make him into the Snallygaster, and something I really like is I like to see where people put the tentacles because they can go so many different ways. A lot of people have them coming out of the mouth, which seems implausible because how would it bite and eat and everything? So I like that she had them coming out of the chest. I think that's really neat. And it has the 7-pointed star, which you probably see these type of things driving up through Pennsylvania, if you go through Pennsylvania Dutch country. So those are called hex stars. They're used for different things, right? They're used for fertility, rain, crop protection. But if you see a 7-pointed one, that's actually specifically to ward off the snallygaster from eating your livestock. So I like that she put it on this moonshine barrel. I think it kind of keeps the whole story together, and I drop this all the time, and I'm really glad I haven't broken it yet because it's not actually connected to him. It goes like plopping off all the time. This is something I worked on for a year with a local artist, Jeff Collins, and we had a lot of discussions about where everything went. Kind of discussing the big folklore points of Maryland and how they relate to Maryland culture, but obviously we had to put Snally on there because that's the best one. We have a lot of, between the Baltimore area, Eastern Shore area, and then Western Maryland, disagreements about who is the Maryland state cryptid, because everyone really wants it to be Chessie, but Chessie was actually proved to be a hoax. It was just like a lost manatee or something, so she's fine, whatever.
Very lost.
Very lost, indeed. But Snallygaster's way cooler. It's a dragon, I mean, come on. So Snallygaster, I'm sure you know if you look at this one, has a mortal enemy, the Dwyo. Do you know about that guy? Dwyo's a dog man, and I have absolutely no idea. No one has been able to figure out how that became a thing, but they are like mortal enemies, fight to the death kind of situation, and they both reside up in the South Mountain area. There's actually a sign about the snarly yow up there, and it's really interesting because you don't see a lot of, you'll see like all these Civil War things, and then just out of nowhere there's like a whole thing about a cryptid. It's really neat. The snarly yow is this big black dog that's spotted when you're going up the mountain, and you know, like with Mothman, some people say it's a harbinger of doom, some people say it's like a warning to help you. So it'll appear in front of your carriage back in the olden days, or your car, and get really, really big and scare you, and then get you, I guess, off the path you were meant to go down. So it's really cool because Snarly Yow actually has his own sign up there by Dahlgren Chapel on South Mountain, and that's the woman who actually originally wrote about a lot of this folklore, Madeline Benton Dahlgren. That's a church that she built, and she's actually buried underneath it, which is super cool. But the Snarly Yow sign is one of my favorite things in Maryland. I wish we had a Snallygaster sign, but we'll work on that. It's okay. But yeah, so we did a whole thing with Maryland folklore, cryptids, all that kind of stuff, and I'm super proud of it. It was a big project.
After returning from our visit, I was inspired to create this, a model of a possible interpretation of the Snallygaster. According to the Snallygaster legend, it was said to have tentacles or tongues of some kind around the face generally. So, in this interpretation, it is around the face in a fashion similar to an octopus. It is also said to have an iron beak and claws, which is shown here. Some artistic licensing has allowed me to show it with feather-like filament on its back and its head, like a crest. We will be donating this to the American Snallygaster Museum with thanks and gratitude for Sarah Cooper's hospitality. I hope you watch our next episode and have watched our previous ones. Our sponsors include the Kitty Petters Union, Cobble Sound Recording Company, and my dad's show, Meet the Pressers. This is Augie Macro with Cryptid Creatures signing off. Come on down today and ride our European dragon. for only $99.95.